Funding for this edition of One-on-One with Steve Adubato has been provided by the Russ Berrie Foundation, making a difference. Holy Name Medical Center, this place is different. The Turrell Fund, supporting Reimagine Childcare. TD Bank. United Airlines, connecting people, uniting the world. Seton Hall University, showing the world what great minds can do since 1856. The Fidelco Group. ADP, always designing for people. And by Fedway Associates, Inc. Promotional support provided by NJ On Air. And by ROINJ, informing and connecting businesses in New Jersey.
This is One-on-One. I'm an equal American just like you are.
The jobs of tomorrow are not the jobs of yesterday.
Look at this. You got this?
Here it is, man. Look at that.
Life without dance is boring.
I don't care how good you are or how good you think you are, there is always something to learn.
Do you enjoy talking politics?
No.
People call me because they feel nobody's paying attention.
Our culture, I don't think, has ever been tested the way it's being tested right now.
Such a good question. High five.
Hi, I'm Steve Adubato. Welcome to a very important conversation. This is a part of a series of conversations, an initiative called 25 for 25. We recognize the 25th anniversary of the Russ Berrie Foundation, their Making a Difference Awards. And I'm honored to introduce, I met her at one of our last events that we had in public when we could be together. She is Fraidy Reiss. She's founder and executive director of Unchained At Last, the 2019 Russ Berrie Making a Difference awardee. Good to see you, Fraidy.
Oh, good to see you, Steve. Those were good times when we could get together in person.
Absolutely. Tell folks exactly what Unchained At Last is and why it matters so much.
Sure. Unchained At Last is the only organization that is dedicated to ending forced and child marriage in the United States. And we do that through both direct services and advocacy.
You have a very personal connection. Share, please.
Yeah, so I founded Unchained out of my own traumatic experience. I myself am a forced marriage survivor, grew up in a very insular religious community where that's just how it works. Your parents marry you off, whether you like it or not, to a stranger. And in my case, this stranger turned out to be violent. And when I finally managed to escape after 15 years with my two daughters, my family and community shunned me. They consider me dead. So that's why I founded Unchained, because I know that there are others right here in the US who are dealing with the same nightmare that I escaped from.
There is no federal law that prohibits child marriage. I assume there was.
Yeah, the
is it
United
state by
States,
state?
So yeah, it's really shocking that in the United States there are very few laws to address forced marriage, to acknowledge it, to prevent it, to punish it after it happens, or to punish the perpetrators. And in terms of child marriage, when we first started advocating for policy and legislative change in 2015 at Unchained At Last, child marriage was legal in all 50 states, every US territory and district. And while marriage age laws are set, unfortunately, it's been pretty well established that those are set by the state and not by the federal government. The federal government as well has laws in place that not only allow, but even encourage child marriage. That's still true today.
Fraidy, what are some of the reasons why child marriage even takes place?
The perpetrators, when a child or an adult is forced to marry here in the US, according to what we have seen at Unchained At Last, the perpetrators are almost always the parents, and their reasons vary. But some of the main ones that we have seen are sometimes it is just because of tradition. It's the way it works in our family. It could be religious or cultural. That's just the way we do things. Often it's also to control a child's behavior or sexuality. If a child comes out as LGBTQ or a girl gets pregnant, there are parents who will use marriage as a way to kind of fix that situation. Even when there is a rape, there are parents who use marriage as a way to cover up a rape so some nice guy doesn't go to prison. Another reason we see a lot is for immigration. There are, unfortunately, I was talking about how at the federal level, there are laws that allow and even encourage child marriage. Believe it or not, there is no minimum age today in the United States to petition for a foreign spouse or fiance. or to be the beneficiary of a spousal or fiancé visa, which is absurd. You have to be 21 to petition for your parent, but you could be 4 and petition for your 80-year-old husband. So we have seen children forced to marry adults overseas so that the adults can come to the US on a visa, get a path to citizenship, and the ability now to legally rape what would otherwise be considered statutory rape, in many cases becomes legal within marriage.
Fraidy, we're playing this out. We're taping this on October 1st, 2020, right? So of all the chaos and confusion and uncertainty in the world, and again, when we first heard about this, I mean, we knew it was going on, but not to the degree that it is that your organization was doing what it's doing. And thank you to the Russell Berrie Foundation for bringing that to light and recognizing you and your organization. But the question I'm curious about is, why is there not more public discussion about this as a really horrible situation that must be addressed and can no longer go on?
Steve, I wish I knew the answer to that. I have been yelling about child marriage and forced marriage for 9 years now, and since 2011 when I founded Unchained. And I do feel that the issue has gained some traction, but I often say, I think at this point I have gotten the message to maybe 3 or 4 million Americans. The problem is there are 350 million Americans. So
what about Congress?
I'm sorry?
What about the United States Congress? I mean, getting the message to the public is one thing, and it's huge. But is there no legislation, federal legislation, that is introduced, that is being considered? I mean, nothing?
There actually is federal legislation, but remember, we have to pass legislation not only at the federal level, and there is legislation pending to close one of the loopholes, at least, that allow and encourage child marriage, the immigration loophole, but there are other things that the federal government needs to do that are not being addressed, and that legislation has been languishing and is unlikely to pass. But remember that we still have 50 states. We have, so far, our advocacy at Unchained at Last has led 4 US states to end child marriage, as well as 2 US territories. So if you do the math, that means we still have 46 states, 3 territories, the District of Columbia, and the federal government to get to. So you're right, there's still a lot of work to do, but I promise we at Unchained at Last are going to keep screaming and writing op-eds and performing our chain-ins. That's a form of protest that we invented, where we wear bridal gowns and chains to show legislators, this is what you're doing. This is what life looks like.
In the time I have left, let me ask you this. You won the award, the Russell Berrie Award for Making a Difference Award in 2019. What does it mean to you? What did it mean? What does it mean to you and the organization?
Well, winning the Russ Berrie Award was huge in so many different ways. And the first one just being that recognition. Most of what we do, you're talking about how most people don't even know this is happening. We're trying to solve a huge problem, a human rights abuse. The US State Department calls marriage before 18 a human rights abuse and calls forced marriage a human rights abuse. And so much of what we do feels very much like we're yelling into the wind after 4 full years dedicated to pushing for policy change and legislative change to end child marriage. Only 4 US states and 2 territories have actually listened to us. So just getting that recognition is wonderful, because it reminds us of the importance of the work that we're doing. It reminds us that at least somebody appreciates it, and that if we keep pushing, we can achieve even bigger change, and we can end child marriage in the United States. So just getting that recognition was important. The awareness raising aspect of it is tremendous as well. We're a tiny organization at Unchained. We've been yelling into the wind, and so many people still didn't hear our message, but getting this kind of recognition also raises awareness. Now you're talking about it now, and there's just much more awareness being brought to the issue.
And just remember when we were
tiny, I'm sorry?
No, I was just going to say, I'm sorry for cutting you off, but I remember that so many people were moved by meeting you at that Making a Difference Award ceremony, and you got the message out to a lot of people, and it's also led us to this moment of being here. I'm sorry, I cut you off. I give you 30 seconds and before I have to end it. Go ahead.
Sure. Just one more thing is that the financial support is huge. We're a very small, scrappy organization. There are only 5 of us operating on a budget of $500,000. So getting a generous grant like that makes a big difference for us.
And by the way, the Russell Berrie Foundation is a big supporter of what we do in featuring not-for-profits. Thank you so much, Fraidy. We wish you all the best.
Oh, thank you.
And we'll be right back after this.
To watch more one-on-one with Steve Adubato, find us online and follow us on social media.
We are honored to be joined by two longtime friends. We've met before, we've talked before. Tricia and Kurt Baker, co-founders of an organization called Attitudes in Reverse. Good to see you, the Bakers.
It's wonderful to see you.
Great to see you, Steve.
We met back in 2016 at the Russ Berrie Making a Difference Awards. You won that year together with some extraordinary people that we recognized. 4 years later, we're doing this in November 2020. We'll talk about COVID in a second, but for those who do not know what Attitudes in Reverse is and why it's so important, talk about it.
Sure. Attitudes in Reverse, also known as AIR, is mental illnesses like air. Just because you don't see it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. It's all around us. And we started the organization shortly after losing our son to anxiety and depression back in 2009. And we realized there were significant misunderstandings about those with mental health disorders. We noticed that while Kenny was, after he was diagnosed, he was trying to seek treatment. And then afterwards, the stigma involved after he passed and how he passed. So we started that organization. We specifically are focusing on youth. It initially started off with high school students. Then right now we have programming all the way from elementary school, second grade, through college level. And so our goal is to really improve the education and the empathy out there as far as those with mental health disorders in our youth and in society in general.
You know, Tricia, that's Kenny's picture behind you.
Yes.
And I want you to do this because the organization and its work is so important. The cause is so important. The problem is probably worse than ever given the COVID reality and the increased level of depression. But do this. This often gets missed. Tell us about Kenny.
Kenny was this amazing young man. He had the kindest heart. He was always thinking about other people. And one of the things I find is that those who do struggle with mental health disorders, they tend to be some of the kindest, most empathetic people. And so true of Kenny. He was really intelligent. At the age of 6, he was struggling with reading, and the school district tested him, and we found out that he had a learning disability called dyslexia, but we also found out at the age of 6, he had the long-term memory of a 29-year-old. So he was extremely bright. This is also something that's very common of those who do struggle with mental health disorders. And it was a freshman year where he was so busy trying to build his college resume. He was working so hard. He had a part-time job. He was trying to keep up really good grades in spite of his learning disability. He was sleeping less and less. And I remember saying to him, you know, Kenny, you're only sleeping 2 or 3 hours a night. How is your body not shutting down? Well, what we didn't know as his parents were, it was his brain that was shutting down. And that's why when we do talk to young people, we talk so much about the importance of sleep, because I really feel that our children are not sleeping enough. When I go into schools and I talk to kids with our program, I always ask them, who sleeps 8 hours or more? And almost none of them will raise their hands. And they kind of laugh at me as if, oh, that's a joke. Nobody sleeps 8 hours. And a lot of our young people are not even sleeping 5 hours a night. And I really feel that that lack of sleep was the trigger that turned on the illness in Kenny's brain. And he did fight. He tried really hard to get well, and then he just lost hope. And hope, I think, is so important for our young people. You know, we're going to talk about COVID. We have to make sure that our young people always have hope that things will get better.
And the other part of this, and by the way, thank you, Tricia, for sharing the way you just did. Kenny, Kurt, let me ask you this. As we talk about Kenny, the other piece of this that's evolved, because both of you learned so much over this period of time, is the use of therapy dogs. Help us understand, because I'm trying to figure that out, how it helps these young people and their families. Is it geared toward young people, teenagers?
Well, I'll start, but I'm going to let Trish finish this one because she's the therapy dog expert. She's the one that actually does the certifications. But what we found early on, when we started to go out and started the organization, you know, back in 2009 in a informal way, all we knew is we had to go talk to people. And one thing we noticed is when we went out and we set up a table in front of Rita's Ice or wherever it might be, or anybody would allow us to talk, people, if we were just sitting there by ourselves, they really didn't want to come up to us and talk about mental health. However, Trish had our little therapy dog, and service dog that Trish has all the time. And when he was around, they would come up and introduce themselves to Mickey. Then
that's Mickey.
Start the conversation.
Hold on, is that?
That is Mickey. Yes.
Dogs help break down the barrier of stigma. As Kurt says, people will come up and they'll pet a dog, and then they'll start talking to you, and then before you know it, we're able to start a conversation about good mental health. Before we included the dogs, people would walk up and realize what we were talking about, and they would leave, but they would stay when we had the dogs. And almost everybody had their own story that they wanted to share after petting the dog. It's grown a lot, the dog program. It's developed where we now include dogs in every one of our educational programs at school. And we're rolling out this fall a kindergarten through third grade program that's all about emotions, exploring our emotions through the eyes of dogs. And that's for the young ones, because we want to have them recognize emotions early, what they might look like, their feelings within themselves or within a friend. But we have heard back from a lot of these school administrators that because our programs include dogs, that the students will remember the programs, the material in the programs longer because they associate the material with the dogs.
Kurt, let me ask you this. We met in 2016 at Ramapo when you won the award. I remember being so moved by what you're talking about and the difference you're making. What was it like meeting those other winners of that award that year?
Oh, it's just amazing how much good is happening out in the world, so to speak. I mean, people, they start off, it's typically some type of tragic event or stressor in their life. And these are the people at the Russ Berrie Awards that really turn that struggle they're having in their life, or that instance that happened to them that would be perceived by many as a negative instance, and they're turning it into a positive. And that's really what a lot of this is about, is trying to turn something that you've lived in your own experience in your own life that is difficult for others to understand, and converting that into a positive impact on society. And by doing that, you can really make that difficult time you had turn into a positive experience for yourself. And I know that many people talk to us and say, hey, well, how can you do that? I mean, you lost your child to suicide. The majority of people, once that happens, they really don't want to have that conversation, because it is very difficult to do. But we felt very differently about that. We felt that it was very therapeutic to us to go out and discuss the issues that we dealt with, discuss the struggles that we had, and the things that we learned, so that we can help others avoid some of those things that we had to deal with, that we didn't understand, that we didn't know, the knowledge that we did not have. And we can learn a lot faster if we listen to other experts and other people that had lived experiences. We can accelerate in any area of our life. This is just the same thing. And if we talk to anybody that has a brain, so to speak, we all have mental health. We're all dealing with this either directly or indirectly. And it's kind of that last frontier. We don't really have open conversations the way we should, considering that it literally impacts every single one of us. And we need to really make it okay to have these conversations openly, honestly, so it can be a productive, constructive process and make everything better for all of us.
Well, Kurt, that's what you have done, and Tricia has done with you. And in the spirit of the Berrie Awards, you just made a big difference. I know you did, and you continue to every day. Thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thank you for having us.
We'll be right back after this.
To watch more one-on-one with Steve Adubato, find us online and follow us on social media.
We're now joined by Jennifer Brady, Executive Director of OASIS, a haven for women and children. Jennifer, great to have you with us.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm very appreciative.
Tell us exactly what OASIS is and why it matters so much.
OASIS is an anti-poverty organization in Paterson, New Jersey, where out of 150,000 residents, over 30% of them are living at or below the poverty level. So we help women and children rise out of poverty, primarily through education. But we have wraparound services to help address all the challenges that are implicit living, about living in poverty. So a woman might come to us initially because she's hungry and she comes to our soup kitchen, but she will soon realize that on the floors above her in the classrooms are women changing the trajectory of their life through education so they can get their high school equivalency degree here, learn English as a second language, get their US citizenship actually. and prepare for the workforce. But importantly, while those women are here, they're getting food, clothing, they're getting free childcare because you can't afford a babysitter if you're living in poverty, social workers, the whole gamut. And then once they go on and they get a job, we're here for their children in the after-school hours. We have a very vibrant after-school academy that's academically driven to help address the learning deficits that so many of the kids in urban areas face every day.
You know, we're doing this program, we're taping it in November. It'll be seen after that as part of this 25 for 25 initiative, recognizing 25 winners over the past 25 years of the Russ Berrie Making a Difference Award. Your organization, A Haven for Women and Children, won the 2013 Making a Difference Award. And what strikes me is you can talk about how challenging it was in 2013, but 2020, 2021, the impact of COVID, not just on your organization, but on the people you serve every day who are in such great need.
Yeah, so on March 16th, when the city of Paterson shut down and went remote, we did the exact opposite. We turned on full speed. Our staff all were in the building, and we went from serving about 150 meals in our soup kitchen to serving 1,900 meals a day in our soup kitchen at the height of the pandemic. Likewise, we usually have a small food pantry that gives out maybe 8 or 10 food bags a day. We went to giving out upwards of 200 food bags every day during the height of the pandemic. So the line in Paterson, where those with the least suffered the most, just to come for food was literally around the block every day. And we did that full steam through Memorial Day. We continued it through the summer, but in September, we relaunched our educational programs. Some are remote, some like the children, although Paterson kids are learning remote in the public school system, our kids are coming here every day and are in class with a teacher. And our hunger relief efforts are still going strong. We're still at more than double capacity where we would normally be, and the families are still lining up every day for a hot meal and for a food bag. So those hourly wage earners, the restaurant workers, the landscapers, the housekeepers, the catering hall workers, you know, they all lost their jobs very quickly. Couple that with the fact that schools aren't in session and most of our families either can't afford babysitters or they don't have any support network. So many of our families, they've just moved to this country. They don't have people they can rely on to watch their kids. So we actually have had, heartbreakingly, people we've helped to get jobs and they've had to leave their jobs because there's no one to watch the 7-year-old at home.
Jennifer, let me ask you this, because you're a leader of a nonprofit, we're a nonprofit. There are many of the nonprofits that are recognized in this 25 for 25 initiative. One of the greatest challenges we all face, you and your colleagues face, around COVID is raising money.
Yeah.
So, yeah, exactly. You're involved in a capital campaign. How the heck do you run a remote capital campaign?
It's been interesting. Of course, we can make the case that we need our building to be bigger than ever because the need is going to be bigger than ever when we come out of this pandemic.
Right.
But we've relaunched our capital campaign, which we suspended at about halfway through in March. But it's a lot of this. It's a lot of Zoom calls. It's a lot of outreach to people. But the need is really speaking to people. People really understand that for you and I, when we're told get 2 weeks worth of groceries in case you have to quarantine, we can do that. But when you're looking at families that are struggling to put food on their tables daily, and if they don't have the education piece and the support piece to come out of this, the effects of this are going to be in Paterson for many, many years to come, but we want to be a part of the solution.
You know, talking about being part of the solution, real quick, the 2013 Russ Berrie Making a Difference Award was presented to your founder, Ann Wagner.
Yeah.
What did that mean? What does it mean? Why does it matter?
It was amazing recognition of someone who was really just so inspirational. She saw a need here in Paterson. She was embedded in the community, and she saw that there was nowhere for mothers to bring their children if they were hungry. There was no soup kitchen that would allow children to go. And she single-handedly went out and raised $30,000 at our first gala and opened OASIS on a wing and a prayer, and really just knowing that our neighboring communities would respond when they knew that this could work. So having that recognition for her was wonderful. it kind of reinvigorated interest in what we were doing, certainly. But that Russ Berrie Award also opened so many doors to us in terms of networking and educational programming that we were able to take part in. It's really been, even though we got the award in 2013, we're still reaping the benefits of it.
You know, talking about connecting and sharing and highlighting, our media colleague, one of our top producers, Joanna Gagas, who did a series for us called Life and Living Now, is with NJ Spotlight News. You can check her out every night. I believe she's on your board. She's involved in the organization. And so she has done some work highlighting what you're doing. But my question goes to this, whether it's Joanna or what we're doing here, why is it so important for the media to highlight the work, not just of your organization, but others who are making a difference with the population you're serving, who, again, are in great need of help?
Sure. You know, most organizations like OASIS, we're relatively small. We don't have big marketing departments. We're struggling right now, in particular, just to meet the needs of the community. Our ability to go out there and communicate to the larger world what the needs are, what we're actually doing here is limited. So having you guys as partners to get the word out, OASIS is 96% privately funded. So we don't get a lot of government funding. We're not a pay-for-service organization. We really exist because of the goodness of people who feel it's their obligation to help the poor among us, right? Right down the road from many of us are some of the poorest, most vulnerable people we'll ever meet. And having you be able to help us get the word out is tremendous.
Well, on behalf of everyone in public broadcasting, and our team and our colleagues in public broadcasting, we'll continue to do everything we can to feature the work that you and your colleagues are doing. Jennifer Brady, Executive Director of OASIS, a haven for women and children, I want to thank you so much for joining us. All the best.
Thank you, Steve.
I'm Steve Adubato. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll see you next time.
One-on-One with Steve Adubato has been a production of the Caucus Educational Corporation. Funding has been provided by the Russell Berrie Foundation, Holy Name Medical Center, the Turrell Fund, supporting Reimagine Childcare, TD Bank, United Airlines, Seton Hall University, the Fidelco Group, ADP, and by Fedway Associates, Inc. Promotional support provided by NJ On Air and by ROINJ.
Data shows that many patients have avoided seeking critical health care in the wake of COVID-19 for fear of contracting the virus. Delaying medical care can have serious consequences, so you should never second guess or ignore your symptoms. At Holy Name Medical Center, we have measures in place to prevent infectious disease from spreading. We're clean, we're open, and we're safe for all your healthcare needs.